And welcome back, my dark little nuggets of spooky loveliness. How are you all doing? There is too much reflection in my glasses, so those are going to have to go, I think. All right. Anyways, my screen is very small. I have a lot of windows open. There's a lot going on. I am your future ghost and host with the most. In other words that rhyme, Vivian. That's me. And welcome to episode 14. We're going to be doing something a little different this episode. I don't have a guest. We have guests scheduled for future episodes out in January and later this month, but decided to try something a little bit different with this one. We're going to go over some haunted locations and talk about some really cool spooky history. Thank you. I love this shirt too. So without further ado, whatever. Anyways, we used to do this with the podcast. I love researching locations before going there. I have not been to any of these ones personally myself, but they are pretty famous. Some of them, a good portion of them are international, but there's a couple that are in the States as well. Future Ghost Tank. Whoop, whoop, look at that. See? It's Kismet, meant to be. So none of these I have been to yet. Put a pin in that. We'll get there. But I do love doing the research before going to some of these large locations because most of them have like really interesting stories. They have a really interesting history about them. There's a reason that they are haunted, and we will find that out shortly. So we're going to be doing several locations tonight, and they are even accompanied by a fancy slideshow. So high tech, I know. Get into it. So let me see if I can get this to work correctly. We're going to do my share screen here. And we're going to share that. Boom. And I get very tiny, and then this is what's going to happen. All right, sweet. So without further ado, let's get started, shall we? So first up on our world tour of haunted locations. If anyone wants to shout this one out before the name comes up in the chat, you are welcome to. If anyone recognizes this one, please let me know. There might be some people that end up popping into the chat that may recognize this later, but anyone know what this one is before I reveal what it is? Crickets, crickets, crickets. Ooh, even better. Nobody knows. I kind of like the fact that nobody knows. Unless somebody does know. And they need to tell me. So this one is one I chose that is in Tasmania, Australia. And I have not a direct connection to this location, but I have a parallel connection to this location. Hi, Daniel. A couple of my ancestors, we're talking far back, 14th, I think, great grandparents, far back the family tree, way up at the top branches, were penal colony inmates in Australia. So go figure, I'm descendant from felons. Wow, big shocker. So they are actually both buried in Australia, not in this particular place, but they are, I've seen photos of their graves there, and it's pretty cool. It is a prison, Tamara. So without further ado, let's reveal the answer to the first one. So number 6 is Port Arthur Prison in Tasmania. So from 1833 till 1853, it was the destination for those who were deemed the most hardened of convicted criminals in Britain. Those who were secondary offenders, having reoffended, like if they came back. Rebellious personalities from other prisons were also sent there. So this is where the baddest of the bad went, you guys. And Port Arthur had some of the strictest security measures in the penal system, in the British penal system. So they had something called the separate prison system at the time, which shifted from physical punishment, which is what they used to use, hard labor and floggings and beatings and things like that, to psychological punishment. They figured that the hardened corporal punishment, like the beatings and things like that, just served to harden criminals and didn't really improve their behavior. So this system was based around behavior modification techniques, probably one of the first times that was attempted with corrections with inmates. And so, for example, food was used to reward a well-behaved prisoner. So you would get extra food, or if you turned in troublemakers, if you were basically a model prisoner, you would receive extra things. So you would get you could possibly get food, extra food, tea, sugar, tobacco, luxury items, like really nice stuff if you were on your best behavior. If you were bad, however, if you broke the rules, if you were a problem, you basically got the bare minimum. You got bread and water, and that was pretty much it, and you were lucky to get that. It was also under the system of punishment that was called the silent system, was implemented in the building, which you guys may be familiar, may or may not be familiar with. But how that worked was that prisoners were hooded. They had to wear cloth hoods and had to remain silent at all periods in time. This was supposed to allow the prisoner time to reflect on the actions that brought them there. Kind of like go to the corner and think about what you've done sort of thing, but for grown-ass adults. You can decide yourselves whether that worked or not. But many of the prisoners developed mental illness because of lack of light, because of the hoods, and lack of sound. So it was now considered cruel and unusual punishment. So this was an unintended outcome. This is not what they originally had in mind for this idea. And there's an asylum built right next to the prison for this reason, because it found itself populated very quickly. Port Arthur was also the destination for juvenile convicts. So children and adults were sent here. And it was not a nice place, you guys. It was really kind of terrible. And the peninsula that it is on is naturally secure because it is surrounded by water. So it's on a peninsula. The waters are rumored to be shark infested. It's Australia. I wouldn't be surprised. And the only connection to the mainland is this tiny little isthmus of land, and it was fenced and guarded by soldiers and traps and booby traps and half-starved dogs. So even if you did try to escape, you had to get through all of that. Shore-based ship-based whaling was banned in the area to keep convicts from trying to escape in boats to other ships. But officers would sometimes set out in their own boats and attempt to catch whales. This may have been for sport, for fun, to kill some time. And, after a while you go batty after, spending so much time around prisoners. So I'm sure it was for amusement, just to kill time. But contact between visiting sailors and prisoners was barred, of course, and ships had to be checked for stowaways to prevent anyone from escaping. Wow, words. Anyways, were there escape attempts made, you ask? Yes, there were. There were a couple that were successful, boats were either seized or rowed or sailed long distances to freedom. But for the most part, Port Arthur was sold as an inescapable prison, kind of like Alcatraz. But some prisoners were like, bet, motherfucker, I'm gonna get out of here. Martin Cash successfully escaped along with 2 other inmates. But one of the more famous incidents, simply for its sheer level of wackadoodle, was the escape attempt of George Billy Hunt. Hunt disguised himself using a kangaroo hide. He disguised himself as a kangaroo, y'all, and tried to escape across that neck of land. But the half guards on duty tried to shoot him because they thought he was a kangaroo and they were hungry. So they were going to kill this kangaroo to supplement their rations. But when he noticed that they were going to shoot him, he threw his kangaroo skin off and quickly went, "Hold up, guys, I'm a dude. Stop. And he surrendered and received 150 lashes and was promptly returned to prison. Despite its reputation for being a pioneering institution for one of the new kind of view of imprisonment, it was harsh. It was not a nice place in, as you can imagine a 19th century prison would be. So there's a place called the Isle of the Dead that is a destination for all who died within the prison and the prison camps. There are 1,600 graves there, but only 180 of those belong to prison staff or military personnel. So the other ones do belong to inmates. Some stories suggest that prisoners committed murder, which was an offense punishable by death, just to get out of prison, just so they didn't have to be there anymore. They opted for the executioner's, noose rather than to stay in prison. So that tells you how bad this place really was. So more than 1,000 people died at Port Arthur. The prison closed in 1877. So during its 47-year history, about, over 1,000 people died there. And some say some of the souls of the departed never left. There's been documented ghost stories that have been associated with Port Arthur since 1870. And since that time, many people have added to its haunted reputation with their own accounts of paranormal activity. In fact, they do still run ghost tours at Port Arthur. They are still currently running them there to this day, even during pandemic. They take all precautions and all that stuff. But if you go on the internet and you look up Port Arthur ghost tours, they do ghost tours through the prison. That is a photo of the parsonage there that's on your screen right now. So they do tours of this whole area, this whole perimeter. They do them at night as well. And you can also there's an option to do like a dinner inside, like a 2-person dinner inside, which I was like, that sounds appealing to me. Like, heck yeah. Dinner, candlelight, ghosts, done. So easy. Like, it doesn't take a lot to make me happy, guys. It really doesn't. So that is location number 6, because we're going to count down. So 1, because it's our first one, but technically 6, because we're counting down. So that is the parsonage there. You can see somebody standing outside of it. But it's a pretty large complex, you guys. When you see it from the shore, well, that kind of ruined the next one. But when you see it from the shore, it is huge. It is a huge prison complex. It's very large. And it sounded like it sucked. So number 5, which kind of a dead giveaway here, is the 10 Bells pub in London. Is anybody familiar with the 10 Bells in the chat? It's okay if you aren't. That is the idea, is that I want to educate as well as horrify. That is my job. Anybody familiar? Anybody? The 10 Bells? No. Wow, I'm batting 1,000 tonight for unknown locations. All right, so the 10 Bells pub. The reason that the 10 Bells pub, as you can imagine, not the oldest pub in London, nor is it probably the only one that's haunted. It's not even, there's pubs all over London, right? Why is this one special? Well, it is an iconic destination that remains important to the darkest moment in East London's history. And By the next slide, you can see why. It's continually served the public since the mid-18th century. The 10 Bells gets its name from how many bells the church across the road held in its tower. So the records say that the establishment was actually called the 8 Bells Ale House in 1755, but received a name change in 1788 to the 10 Bells right around the time that the church added 2 whole bells to its system. So nice that the names, they got to keep up with the Joneses, as it were. So just as it remains today, the pub is an extremely popular watering hole in the East End of London, as it was during the 1800s. It gained its fame during this time for its popularity, though, because of a little bit of more of an infamous reason, because it's of its association with London's best-known serial killer, Jack the Ripper. So as you can see on the board here, which we're going to get into in a second, because I'm a bit of a ripperologist myself, and you can see that there's what are called the canonical 5 victims, which are Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jean Kelly are the canonical 5 victims of Jack the Ripper, or at least the ones that are most historians agree on that he definitely killed these ladies. The first one at the top, Martha Turner, is one that is still up for debate. It's considered to be possibly his first victim, although there are authorities at the time seem to think that that was the case, but it's unfortunately you're not able to really, there's things that are pros and cons in both camps. The wounds don't really match future Ripper victims. There's things that like say that it could be, and there's things that say it can't. So, but they do include it on this board here at the 10 Bells. So the reason that the 10 Bells is associated with Jack the Ripper, because at least 3 of his victims were said to have had an association with this bar in particular. In the spring of 1888, Elizabeth Stride was thrown out of the pub for drunk and disorderly behavior. She sounds like a good chick to party with, by the way, just throwing that out there. Mary Kelly was seen in the pub with a friend on the night before her death and was known to frequent the street outside the bar while she was seeking her male clientele. And allegedly, Annie Chapman was said to be drinking alone in the 10 Bells only hours before her body was discovered. So having such close ties to Jack the Ripper makes this one of London's creepiest pubs. And it seems only fitting that one of the killer's victims should haunt the 10 Bells, reportedly. The spirit of Annie Chapman has supposedly been sighted within the pub, and she is thought to sit in the exact location that she had her last drink before she was murdered. Further, some claim that she is responsible for breaking glasses and stealing from unexpected guests. So that's a fun thing. So the next thing, so we have that. And this is a shot of the 10 Bells at the time. You can kind of see it on the corner there. That is a street in London in the 1800s, late 1800s. And that's it there as well. So despite its ties to Jack the Ripper, which of course is hugely famous in true crime circles, it also has a long history outside of these murders. But it also, so it has a whole, sorry guys, I'm reading notes at the same time and I'm getting tongue-tied a little bit. But not surprisingly, the pub is said to hold other spirits from around that time. It's been, open for a couple hundred years now. Perhaps the most active and commonly seen spirit within the pub is an older man. He is described as wearing Victorian-era clothing. He's generally sighted in the upper floors, up here, like in these areas where staff were once able to live on site. They used to have like rooms up there that you could stay in. Previous tenants would hear report laughter and footsteps up and down the halls, but nobody was there. And the spirit was known to even sneak into the beds during the night to the fright and chagrin of unsuspecting staff members. So nobody really knew who he was, though, until some documents were discovered in 2000 when the pub's ownership passed into new hands. A wallet was found with some press clippings inside a box in the cellar. And the press clippings spoke of the murder of a man named George Roberts, who was a landlord of the pub in the late 1800s, 1900s, turn of the century. So could it be his ghost that's haunting the halls? Possibly. Another story of interest within the 10 Bells is that one that relates to that of a mysterious baby who was possibly murdered within the building. In more recent times, a psychic was brought in to help explain some of the paranormal things that have been happening inside of the bar. But supposedly the psychic refused to enter one of the top rooms of the pub. They just kind of got there and stopped and were like, nope, there's bad juju. I don't like this. She was unable to explain why specifically, but suggested that something terrible had transpired there relating to the death of a baby or a child sometime in the 19th century. But several years later, here's the kicker, guys. Several years later, a researcher was touring the pub, and while up inside the attic space, she noticed some material stuffed behind a water tank. Upon closer investigation, it turned out that the material was a sack containing some moldy baby clothes from the turn of the century. Even weirder, the clothing appeared to have been cut or slashed with a knife repeatedly. Weird, right? Oh, and the water tank where the clothing was found, it was right above the room that the psychic had refused to enter. Eerie, creepy. I need to go there ASAP. There are also reports of a mysterious poltergeist in the pub who no one really seems to know the identity of. In 2001, a tenant kept hearing laughing and footsteps in the hallway when he was the only one in the bar. And he would go inspect it and always found the corridor empty. And not a soul in sight whenever he'd see if somebody was walking up and down the halls. Nobody was there. Also, when heading down to the bar, he would sometimes feel pushed by an invisible hand. So they're unsure of the identity of that third spirit, but definitely at least 3 haunt the halls of the 10 Bells pub in London. So if you guys are ever in London, it is still open. The upper floors, I believe, are currently closed, probably due to pandemic. But if you are in London or are visiting London anytime in the near future, definitely go check it out. Definitely do one of those Ripper tours, then have yourself a pint at the 10 Bells. Or some whiskey, apple juice, whatever. So that was number 5. So now we're going on to number 4. So number 4 is going to take us out of Europe and back to the United States, where we have 2 locations that are actually, oddly enough, in the same state. Does anyone want to take a guess at the next location before I turn the slides on? And yes, it is creepy and very sad, but I really want to go there. I really want to do one of those Ripper tours. Anybody have a guess? All right, well, let's get this fired up and find out what exactly is the next location. So by 10 Bells, it's a very cool building too, by the way. And those are, if no one's familiar with those are newspaper, because newspapers didn't have photos really at the time. They would rely on like drawings and lithographs and sketches for headlines. And these were the depictions in the papers at the time of the Ripper murders. So number 4 is Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, also known as TALA, and that's what I'm going to call it because Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum is a mouthful to say every single time, and TALA makes it sound a little less drear. It's considered to be one of the most haunted places in America, you guys, and it is located in Weston, West Virginia. It was built in the late 1850s, designed by Thomas Story Kirkbride. He was a huge advocate for the mentally ill and later was the founder of the American Psychiatric Association. He worked closely with Dorothea Dix, which if you don't know who she is, shame on you. She was a real badass broad. Not only was she a teacher, she was also a nurse and dedicated her life to social reform. Dr. Kirkbride had a view of mental illness that was not pretty typical at the time. It was that to give people fresh air and space, and it was a place of respite. It was supposed to be like a peaceful place of respite for people to, you know, deal with their mental health issues. The Tala opened in 1863, and for a while things were neat. They were fine. The hospital could house up to 250 patients, each with their own room. There were wide open windows that provided natural light and fresh air. And in addition to the hospital itself, the Tala also had its own farm, dairy, water supply, gas well, and cemetery. So it was pretty, hey Matt, it was pretty self-sufficient as a location, state of the art for the time as well. It was designed to make patients feel at home, well cared for, and restored so they could eventually go home and leave the facility. That was the idea. That only lasted about 18 years, though. Around 1881, it came with 1881 came around, and with it and came an increase in mental health diagnoses and an increased stigma around said diagnosis. This led to an increased population at the Tala, leading them to house nearly about 750 people, which is 500 more than it was designed to care for. Things only declined from there. One-person rooms were filled with 4 to 5 people, and the farm and the dairy, which could provide for a maximum of 300 people, obviously could not keep up with that increased demand, which caused patients to suffer from malnutrition. Can it get worse, you ask? Oh, yes, it can, actually. In 1938, the Tala's population was over 6 times its max capacity. In the 1950s, which was only about 70 years ago, the small hospital housed some 2,600 patients. And as you know, mental health hospitals back in the day, hey, Frank, were not exactly dens of enlightenment as far as, like, you know, a place to get better, as more it was a place to lock people away and forget about them and never see them again. So journalists went in to investigate the Tala around this time to expose the terrible conditions. Patients were sleeping on the floor and in freezing rooms due to lack of furniture and heat. They would find rooms that didn't have a stick of furniture in them, just basically bedrolls on the floor with people just sleeping just in squalor, basically. The overcrowding had resulted in an overworked staff and decreased emphasis on sanitation. The windows were just filthy, caked with grime, and the wallpaper was peeling from decay, and where it hadn't disintegrated on its own, the patients had torn it off in a panic. Some patients were even locked up in cages to make more bedrooms available for less worrisome patients. So as you can imagine, the hospital was pretty overwhelmed at this point. You've got 6 times the people you're supposed to have. You have the same amount of staff. You know, things are pretty draconian at that point in time when it comes to treatment of mental illness. So what can a strained mental hospital do? Just when you were about to say things can't get worse, Viv, they can't get worse. Oh, they can. So in an effort to help quell their problems, the Tala became the training hub for lobotomies. Yeah. Walter Freeman, the surgeon most famous for the procedure, would go on to perform about 3,500 lobotomies, including, and perhaps the most famous, the one he performed on Rosemary Kennedy. His method involved putting a thin ice pick-like rod into the eye socket right behind the eye. While you're still awake, you guys, while you're still awake, and then hitting the handle with a hammer to sever connective tissue in the prefrontal cortex, which basically made you a living vegetable. This was a way of managing people's mental illness back in the day. And I believe he won a Nobel Prize in medicine for this, you guys. Yeah, wasn't great. Dark times, indeed. So, despite the horrible procedures that were performed there and the squalor that was exposed by the Charleston Gazette's journalists, the Tala wasn't shut down, you guys, until 1994. 1994. Like, they finally closed it in 94. I was in middle school in 94 is when they finally closed this place. But today, visitors can go to the Tala and venture on one. There's lots of tours that they provide for, some of them are as low as $10. Paranormal investigators and ghost hunters who have visited in the past say that they can feel the presence of hundreds of people who just died in horrible conditions, horrible unsanitary conditions. There were hundreds of deaths there. That's one of the wings with some of the doors open. You can see it during the day. You can imagine how creepy that looks at night with no lights on. Yeah, it was more of a geriatric hospital by then, but you can see in this last photo here, there's some examples of the overcrowding where there were just beds in the hallways, basically mattresses on the floors in the hallways. Yes, it's a good thing the medical field has gotten a lot better since then. Thank God for the advent of psychiatric medication and that we don't stick ice picks in people's eye sockets anymore. So others have sensed the spirit of a little girl named Lily. She's one of the better known spirits. Yes, there were children in this place, and she was born in the hospital. Jesse, a man who died of a heart attack in a bathtub, and a patient who was brutally murdered by his roommates. There's also somebody that goes by the name of Jim. He's also a fairly interactive spirit, according to other paranormal investigators that have been to this location. So yeah, just a smorgasbord of misery and horribleness, you guys, for real. And that's what makes a lot of these places so very haunted, because there are so many impressions of misery and sadness, and that's what causes residual hauntings, at least according to some people's theories. I think so. That energy has to go somewhere, and it sometimes tends to hang out. So this is why you find that prisons and mental institutions or former asylums tend to be very haunted. Speaking of which, next location. So a short hop, skip, and a jump, you guys, to the West Virginia Penitentiary, which is in Moundsville, West Virginia. It's widely regarded as one of the most haunted prisons in the United States. Weird that West Virginia has the most haunted asylum, one of the most haunted locations / asylums, and the most haunted prison. But here we are. So the history of this prison is a dubious one from the beginning. That is the wagon gate that they used to deliver prisoners at. Outside of there, it's the mess hall. So we will stop there for a second while I recap a little bit for you. So the area surrounding Moundsville was once inhabited by prehistoric indigenous tribes who would ceremonially bury their dead in burial mounds. So we're starting off with an Indian burial ground. You kind of see where I'm going here. The penitentiary was established in 1866, which was only 3 years after West Virginia became a state of the Union. Its very construction was due to inmate labor, and it continued housing inmates, 653 in total, along with a staff of 32, until its ultimate closure in 1995 due to quote-unquote inhumane conditions. How bad do conditions have to be in a prison for them to be considered inhumane? Wow. Just wow. The walls in many of the common areas feature murals by 3 inmates with the help of color mixing from a 4th due to one of the inmates painters being colorblind. So there are still murals that exist in there. You can still tour this facility. It is open to the public. The building itself is divided into 4 separate and colorfully named sections. The North Hall, which was also called the Alamo, housed the worst and most violent offenders, men whose behavior and actions and crimes earned them 22 to 24 hours a day inside a 5 by 7 foot cell. So basically large enough to maybe like walk in a couple times, and that's it. About the size of a work cubicle. The new wall housed the general population, otherwise known as the main line, and the area known as Rat Row housed snitches and informants whose testimony against their fellow inmates earned them special protection, as well as their own separate exercise area in the yard. Because as we all know, the rule on the street is snitches get stitches. That is how it go. And then Honor Hall, which was the fourth area of the prison, was the polar opposite of the Alamo. It was inhabited by the trustees whose good behavior earned them special privileges and decreased security. So that was the area for the good guys. Good as you can be in prison. Over 129 years of its operation, as you can see, it's a pretty big mess hall. Older picture there. But over 129 years of its operation, 93 men were executed in the penitentiary, which is this photo right here. 83 of them by hanging and 9 by electrocution. Oh, thanks, Matt. Hangings were performed in the prison up until 1949. The condemned were led up the death house's 13 stairs, and their heads were slipped through a noose with 13 knots. Can anybody tell me why the number 13 was symbolic in hangings? Anybody? No? Really? Shall I enlighten you? Well, the number 13 is symbolic of the judge and each member of the 12-man jury. Not only that, but it was also, in some more colorful interpretations, it's also representative of the 12 apostles and Judas, who is the 13th, who was the traitor. So there's a... You number 13, don't hang me. But that was why the number 13. So a couple reasons for the number 13, but there's both of them. All hangings were public, which macabre, until 1931, and not because of sensitivities. Let me tell you why. Why they were like, after that, nope, no more. So it wasn't because people were like, gross, this is barbaric and we probably shouldn't watch this. It was because a man was decapitated during the hanging process, which can happen if the hanging is done incorrectly. Head pops right off like a bottle cap. So after that, all executions were strictly by invitation only, which was limited to the inmate's family, the family of the victim, the media, members of the clergy, and the coroner. In 1951, capital punishment was reinstated by the state of West Virginia, and rather than bring back hanging, they decided to wrench themselves into the modern era by installing an electric chair. The chair itself, affectionately known as Old Sparky, was commissioned to and built by a fellow inmate. So a fellow inmate built the electric chair that's in the prison. It's still there to this day, you guys. Old Sparky is still in that prison. For obvious reasons, this unfortunate fellow joined the ranks of those in protective custody in Rat Row. Because I don't think anyone is going to let you live that down. You built the what? Get the out of here, dude. like, I can't imagine if they came up to you and they were like, so we need a favor. We need you to build something. Oh, sweet, dude, I'm a carpenter. What? Like, what? I can make everything. I can make a bookshelf. Do you need a bookshelf? Do you need, like, what do you need? This is kind of a big ask, but we need you to build an electric chair. A what? Electric chair. You want... I really hope they gave him something cool. Like, I really hope they gave him something cool other than just protective custody. I really hope that guy got, like, extra desserts for the rest of his sentence for that. I don't care. That seems fair. And then, yeah, glitter chair. He did not get executed in it, as far as I know, the person who built it, but he was basically just stuck in protective custody for the rest of his sentence, as far as I know. The electrician who performed the day before check of the switch installed one hot switch and 2 dead ones, so as to give the guards responsible for throwing the switch a 2 out of 3 chance not to fire the live one. It's the same reason that they put one live bullet when they do firing squad. And the rest of them are blanks so that nobody knows who actually killed the person because they think that's too much of a weight on someone's conscience. And the more you know. I know too much about these things. So far beyond the average beatings and violent atmosphere of any prison, the West Virginia Penitentiary earned a special place in the halls of infamous notoriety. It saw its fair share of riots and deaths, 36 murders on site to be exact, enough to get it listed amongst the Department of Justice's top 10 most violent correctional facilities. Charles Manson even once petitioned to be relocated here. I guess he was down to party. His handwritten request remains on display to this day in the death chamber area. I really had no idea that the Department of Justice ranked stuff like BuzzFeed, but whatever. All I want to know is if more of these top 10 lists exist, you guys, because I need to know and I need to see them. That is one of the cell blocks there. Clearly, with its violent past and grim origins, this place has had its fair share of demons, both literally and figuratively. Ghosts have been seen and heard in the condemned halls, as well as sightings of the most famous specter, aka the sinister Shadow Man, a dark and featureless silhouette of a figure that roams the entire prison grounds. Nobody really knows who the Shadow Man was or could be. There's no identity that anyone has associated with this particular spirit. Perhaps a murdered inmate. There were 36 people murdered here, or a guard that keeps vigil in death that he kept in life. One thing is agreed upon: the Shadow Man is an incredibly intimidating presence to those who have encountered him. So he is not a nice spirit as far as anyone knows. He's very intimidating and scary. So we're going to leave West Virginia since we've spent quite a bit of time there, and we are going back over to Europe to visit the last couple locations. This one is sadly the only closed location on the list, because the penitentiary is open, much like Tala. They do ghost tours there. I believe Tala's season is March to November is their tourist season. I'm not really sure about the penitentiary, but they both have websites up where you can look at the ghost tours that they offer. Again, a lot of these places are limiting tour groups or limiting visits due to pandemic, due to COVID. But if you are in that area, if you're around there, I highly recommend you go check it out. Go visit. Maybe you'll see the Shadow Man. You can say hi to old Sparky. That poor sucker who had to build him. That poor sucker. So the next location, again, unfortunately, is the only closed location on the list, but it's Poveglia Island. Does anyone want to tell me what Poveglia Island is famous for? This may sound familiar to some of you. Electric Pagan, no, but that is a good guess. That is going to be probably on another Haunted History if you guys want me to do another one of these. We'll do the Island of the Dolls. It was recently up for sale. I believe it is still for sale. So Poveglia Island is located, it's a small island located between Venice and Lido in the Venetian Lagoon in northern Italy. Sounds like a typical charming vacation spot, no? Well, no, it's not. It wouldn't be on this list if it was. So let's get into why that is. For more than 100 years, beginning in 1776, the island was linked with plague, death, suffering, and madness. Because of this, the island is frequently featured on paranormal shows. The island is first mentioned in the Chronicles of 421 when people from Padua and Este fled there to escape barbarian invasions. In the 19th, I'm getting ahead of myself. I am traveling in time, you guys. In the 9th century, the island's population began to grow, and in the following centuries, it grew in importance. They recognized it as having a really critical spot in the lagoon. And when it became, in 1379, when Venice came under attack from the Genoan fleet, the people that were there moved to the Giudecca. So they abandoned the island. The island remained uninhabited in the subsequent centuries, and in 1527, the Doge offered the island to the Camaldolese monks. They said, hard pass, we're good. We're going to stay where we're at. And then from 1645 on, the Venetian government built 5 octagonal forts, which you can kind of see there, to protect and control the entrances to the lagoon. The Poveglia Octagon is one of the 4 that still survive. So they kind of use them as like defense locations in the lagoon to keep Venice from being invaded. So very strategic, very important, but not really haunted, not really creepy. So let's find out why that is. We're going to get into that. Let's get into it. So it came under the Public Health Office, under the jurisdiction of the Public Health Office in 1776, and became a checkpoint for all goods and people that were coming to and going from Venice by ship. In 1793, there were several cases of the plague on 2 ships, and consequently, the island was transformed into a temporary confinement station of the ill, which is also called a lazaretto in Italian. This role became permanent in 1805 under the rule of walking short man syndrome himself, Napoleon Bonaparte, who also had the old church, which was on the island. You can see a bell tower there. Torn down, it was destroyed. The bell tower was converted into a lighthouse in 1806. So the bell tower that you see there is the only remaining structure from the old church that was destroyed, that was on the island. The lazaretto was closed in 1814, but that's not the darkest thing about this charming little isle in the Venetian lagoon. Are you ready for a dive into the dark side of history? Okay, but you've been warned. The island contains 1 or more plague pits. An estimate published by National Geographic suggests that over 100,000 people died on the island over the centuries and were buried in plague pits. Yeah, not joking around with plague, you guys. So another source, Atlas Obscura, provides an estimate of 160,000 people. So we're talking some big numbers here, some big league numbers, with the dead stacked up in holes. In the ground. So many are there that there are whispers that 50% of the soil consists of human remains. Recently, mass graves have been found on the nearby islands of Lazaretto Nuovo and Lazaretto Vecchio, containing the remains of thousands of plague victims, but Poveglia has yet to be fully investigated. So there were similar islands that were used for similar purposes, and they do have plague pits on them as well. So it only stands to reason that this one also has quite a few. So the surviving buildings on the island, as you can see, do consist of a cavana, which is a covered, you can see on this side over here, it's a covered place for ships to dock, a church, a hospital, an asylum, and a bell tower, and housing and administrative buildings for the staff. The bell tower and the lighthouse is the most visible structure on the island, which you can see in that drawing there as well, and it does date back to the 12th century. In 1922, the existent buildings that were remaining standing on the island were converted into an asylum for the mentally ill and later used as a nursing home / long-term care facility until its closure in 1968. Afterwards, the island was briefly used for agriculture, but then it was completely abandoned. I'm not going to... You can imagine how rich the soil with human remains is going to be. Makes for good fertilizer. Facts. The island has been vacant, though, ever since. A bridge connects the island on which the buildings stand. The octagonal fort is on a 3rd separate island in the front, and it's not connected. The fort itself is basically just the earthen rampart, just the base, faced on the outside with brick. So there is no actual fortress anymore where that used to be. In 2014, the Italian state auctioned a 99-year lease of Poveglia, which would remain state property to raise revenue, hoping that a buyer would redevelop the hospital into maybe a hotel or something, because that seems like a good idea, right? Let's turn this place that's covered in plague pits and had a mental institution on it into a luxury getaway, because why not? You know, why not? Seems like a good idea. Do you want haunted hotels? Because this is how you get haunted hotels, you guys. The highest bid was from Italian businessman Luigi Brugnaro. He bid 513,000 euros at the time, and he planned to invest 20 million euros in a restoration plan, but the lease didn't proceed because the project was judged not to meet all conditions. Other sources suggested that the deal was annulled because the bid was too low. Brugnaro initially fought the cancellation of the lease, but he became mayor of Venice and then went, guys, I'm out, and renounced any intention to the island. In 2015, a private group, Paveglia Pertutti, was hoping to raise 25 to 30 million euros for a new plan to include a public park, marina, restaurant, hostel, and a study center. Again, this is how you get haunted buildings, you guys. As of mid-2019, however, the island is still vacant. The island does remain strictly off limits to visitors. You can apparently pay fishermen. There's a photographer that went there to take some photos. Some of the photos you've seen in this, that one with the overgrowth, was taken by a journalist who basically bribed a fisherman to take him to the island and just gave him some money and was like, hey, fucking take me out there and don't say nothing. But the island is still for sale for about 2 million euros. So such a steal for a plague island, wouldn't you say? So that is one of the plague pits that they have found on the island, but they estimate there's a lot more. When you died of the plague, there wasn't a whole lot of questions. They just kind of heaped you into a pit. They didn't really understand how modern medicine worked at the time, and they just into the pit you go, and then just bodies basically until the pit was full, and it was then covered up and a new one was started. There are many, 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 many plague pits across Europe because of it got hit by plague, not once, but twice. Once pretty bad, obviously, during the Black Plague in the 1300s, and then again in the 1600s. So, yeah, pretty plaguey. Pretty plaguey, you guys. Yes, start saving. Start saving now. Let's start a GoFundMe. We're not going to buy that Pioche hospital. We're going to buy this. I think that was the original plan too, was to buy this, and that was like, oh, it's 2 million euros. Never mind. Yeah, the smell would have been pretty terrible because people were also gross back then, Max. They didn't much care for personal hygiene. As a matter of fact, they thought bathing was what made you sick. They didn't understand, hygiene, and they didn't understand bacteria and microorganisms and germs and stuff. So they thought, you get in the water and you get wet and then you get cold and then you die. So I'm not going to do that. And it's like, no, it's not. It's not that. So yeah, it was not pretty times. These were also the times when they used to dump their toilets out the window because there was no plumbing, just into the street, as is your wont. How many bodies? Yeah, Electric Pagan, good point. How many bodies did they burn instead of just tossing them in the pits? Because a lot of times would either incinerate bodies, people that died of the plague, or you would just throw them into a pit and just cover it up. Hopefully, maybe they will turn it into a memorial at some point. That seems like the most respectful thing you could do, rather than turning it into a hostel and a tourist attraction. But would love to go investigate it for sure, because I'm sure it is full of ghosts. And since Europe doesn't have an official Great Plague memorial, I feel like that's a good spot for one, to all the people who died during the plague, just in general. Just a thought, tossing it off the old noodle. How do you guys like the history so far? Before we get to the last location. Stinky ghosts indeed. Ugh. Yuck. Just yuck. Not a fan of the stinky ghosts. History is great. It is one of my favorite things. This is why I love doing little historical rundowns. So I know it was a little rough at the beginning. I was having blah, blah, blah. issues. But I'm glad you guys like it. So, without further ado, the last location on today's episode, and then we'll open it up for questions, because why not? Because I can. Anyone want to take a guess at what the final location is? It's in Europe. I'll give you a hint. It's in Europe. I'll even do you one better. It's in the UK. We'll narrow it down even more. Put even finer point on it. I love dark history. It's like my favorite thing. The dark side of history. So the final location, the Tower of London, that's a good guess. No, but that is a very good guess. So the final location is my personal dream destination, paranormal dream destination location. Drum roll. It is Leap Castle in Ireland. It is reportedly the most haunted castle in Ireland, you guys, which is saying a lot. So we depart the shores of mainland Europe to travel to my dream destination location, Spooky Fam. So be sure to have your tray tables in the upright and locked positions, because it takes us to the foggy, mystical shores of the Emerald Isle. I believe it's in County Kerry, but somebody can correct me on that if that's not correct. And the majestic, troubled, and terribly haunted Leap Castle. So there's a bit of debate on the origins and construction of the castle itself. Some claim that it was built in the 12th century, while others claim it was closer to the 15th. Regardless of the time period, Leap Castle was constructed on burial grounds that had been used for, not burial grounds per se, but it was constructed on grounds that had been previously used by druids for initiation ceremonies. So think Indian burial grounds, but with less dead people and a lot more robes and chanting and standing stones. Leap Castle was originally named Lim Ubanan. There we go. In Gaelic, which means Leap of the O'Bannons. This hints to the original origins of the castle itself and the calamitous, tragic circumstances that surround it. So the O'Bannon clan that constructed the castle were an affluent clan in County Tipperary. As the legend goes, two of the O'Bannon brothers were contesting for clan leadership. In order to determine the winner and the ultimate ruler of the family, the siblings challenged each other to leap from a rock, I'm not joking, you guys, from where the castle was to be built. The one who survived the jump, survived, you guys, survived the fucking jump, would not only govern the clan, but also be responsible for the construction of the castle stronghold. By the way, if you don't break all your bones when you fall down there, you got to build a castle on top of it too. That seems just like a burden, but whatever. I have to say, not a surprising challenge, though, coming from Irish folk. If any of you have been to a pub on St. Patrick's Day, you can attest to some equally ridiculous stunts. The O'Bannon rule over the castle was not fated to be long, unfortunately. They themselves had sworn fealty to the O'Carroll clan, who had a reputation for being ruthless, fueled by greed, and ambition for power. All great things which usually don't end well at all. With the seizing of the castle by the O'Carroll clan, a gruesome legacy of carnage began that many say left a supernatural mark on the castle itself to this day. According to legends, many massacres occurred within the walls of formidable Leap Castle at the hands of its new proprietors. So, backtracking here for a second, can you imagine you're contesting for the head of a clan, you have to jump off a cliff to figure out which one of you is going to do that, survive, heal from your injuries, which would take a long time back then, because, no modern medicine, build a castle, only to have somebody come in and go, yeah, it's a pretty cool castle you built, and just take it from you. and take it away and go, yeah, that was cool that you jumped off the cliff and everything and like built the castle, but yeah, we're gonna take it. We're gonna, like, it's our castle now, so hard luck, dude. Gotta go. Bye. So when the chief of the O'Carroll clan died and appointed no successor, a dispute arose between his sons and his potential heirs, Thaddeus and Teague. Thaddeus was a priest and was slaughtered in mid-mass by his brother in the area, which you see in the slides above you is now known as the Bloody Chapel. So that was the chapel that was inside Leap Castle, and a priest was murdered in it, you guys, because that doesn't seem like a way to send yourself on a direct express ticket, do not pass go to hell. A spirit is often felt or seen here wearing priestly garments, as well as in the stairway below the chapel itself. So there's a stone stairway that spirals up that he is also been reportedly seen in. So the O'Carrolls seem to unabashedly use murder as a means to get ahead, as in their famous slaying of the McMahon family. The McMahons had been employed by the O'Carrolls to battle one of the O'Carrolls' rival clans, and they were successful. However, and perhaps the most shady double cross since Brutus and Julius Caesar or Katy Perry and Taylor Swift, the O'Carrolls decided that rather than paying the McMahons who had actually done the work they had been asked to do, they would simply poison them all at a large feast thrown at the castle in their honor, because why wouldn't you do that? The ghosts of the betrayed family have been spotted numerous times on the castle grounds by visitors. So, like, his own, yes, JG, his own brother, who was a priest. So, brother in the priestly sense, brother in the fraternal sense, murdered in mid-mass while he was talking and praying. He was dead. Yeah. This family gave zero fucks, you guys. Like, zero. Like, killed a priest in mid-mass, poisoned a whole family at a banquet. Zero fucks given. At all. Yikes. It's like, this family's body count is insane, and they're not done. You think they're done? They're not done. One of the more famed and notorious spirits, I have had too many spirits apparently, that roams the castle is known only as the Red Lady. Her actual name has been lost to the pages of time. She's often seen in flowing red gowns and holding a sharp dagger, as is her wont. Legend has it that she was imprisoned by the O'Carrolls for reasons unknown and, trigger warning, was repeatedly raped. She subsequently gave birth to a child, which her captors quickly killed on the reasoning that they could not afford to feed it. Distraught over the loss of her child, the lady ended her life with the very blade that her phantom still bears. This does sound like Game of Thrones. Very correct. Very correct. I'm pretty sure this is a good portion of what Martin based Game of Thrones on. They sound like the Lannisters. I'm just saying. The O'Carrolls were so murder happy, so it doesn't stop there, you guys. It doesn't stop with the murder of a baby. No, you would think that somebody's bloodlust would be satisfied at this point. You've killed an entire family at a banquet. You've killed a priest. Now you've killed a baby. You think you'd be done. You'd be like, you know what? Gonna rest up my murder laurels. I'm good. Hit all the boxes. I'm out. No. They were so murder happy that they installed, and that's the next photo, an oubliette in the castle, or what everybody besides the French calls a fucking murder hole. It's a fucking murder hole, you guys. It was a hole in the floor of the castle behind a wall in the chapel where an 8-foot drop onto spikes would make quick, bloody work of any intended victims. And even if the fall didn't kill them, which you honestly probably hope it would, that's the quickest way to go, any survivors would waste away in the dark, slowly starving to death or dying from wounds, whatever got them first. The oubliette wasn't discovered until the 1900s. The O'Carrolls were such fans of the murder hole that it would take three cartloads to remove all the skeletons that had amassed in the pit. A pocket watch dating back from the 1840s was also found in the remains unearthed from the oubliette, which begs the question, was this the result of a tragic accident, somebody fall in, or had the pit even been in use up through as recently as the 1800s? Food for thought. And the bloody history wasn't quite done yet. In the 1600s, the castle switched ownership again, but as was par for the course, it was not a peaceful transition. The daughter of the reigning O'Carroll clan chieftain had fallen in love with one of the prisoners in the castle dungeon in a weird Romeo and Juliet kind of sort of thing. Is an English captain named Darby. She would sneak food down to him, and one night they planned to escape and elope. It's not going to end well, you guys. as this whole history is going, you can imagine how this goes. So she snuck down to free him, but their secret jailbreak was short-lived, and they encountered her brother on the stairs. The two men drew swords and fought in a duel in which the O'Carroll son and heir, her brother, was killed. The daughter then inherited the castle and married her jailbird lover. But it wasn't all roses and sunshine, as these stories aren't usually. Captain Darby was known as the Wild Captain. He was a temperamental and fickle man who had amassed treasures that he had won in battle and then buried them in scattered places along the castle grounds. He was later imprisoned in Dublin for treason, but was later allowed to return to Leap Castle under a form of house arrest. Years of imprisonment drove him mad, however, and left him unable to recall where he had buried his many treasures. The fortune remains hidden and buried on the grounds, and many say the spirit of the Wild Captain still wanders and is occasionally seen searching for his lost bounty. If only we'd be so lucky to find it. One of the captain's ancestors, however, Mildred Darby, was a Gothic novelist and sounded exactly who I want to hang out with. She conducted regular seances within the castle walls, and it was supposedly these rituals and spiritual stirrings that would awaken an incredibly dark elemental presence. Perhaps a relic left behind by protective druids who wished to guard their ceremonial grounds, or even an O'Carroll ancestor who was said to have perished painfully of leprosy. The origin of the being is entirely unknown. The best account comes from Mildred herself, who claimed to have seen the dark being up close and personal and described it as thin, gaunt, with rotting features and exuding the potent stench of decaying flesh. The most recent proprietors of the castle, who took it over in 1991, have never encountered the elemental. It's only been seen by Mildred, as far as I know. Perhaps it was solely attached to her due to her spiritual experimentation and the whole fuck around and find out thing that she did. Or maybe it's found rest in the years since then. It's not been seen again. The Darbys would abandon the castle in 1922 in the midst of Ireland's fight for independence from England. The Darbys, being a British family, no longer felt safe, of course, for obvious reasons, and the castle was a prime target for revolt. The castle was bombed and looted by the IRA after the departure of the Darbys and sat vacant until the 1970s, when it was purchased by Australian historian and O'Bannon descendant Peter Bartlett. Bartlett began renovating the castle for the next 15 years and experienced a good deal of poltergeist and supernatural activity all through his tenure. He passed away in 1989, and in 1991, musician Sean Ryan and his wife Anne purchased the castle and resumed restoration efforts. They have been plagued with freak accidents since acquiring the castle. A broken kneecap and a subsequent broken ankle slowed down renovation efforts, but did not keep the Ryans from conducting their newborn's christening in the Bloody Chapel, which was a joyous and celebratory event compared to the decades of bloodshed and turmoil that had previously occurred there. The Ryans still own the castle to this day. There are still tours conducted at the castle to this day. They conduct private tours for curious tourists and fans of the supernatural, as well as intrepid paranormal investigators. It's a favorite destination and has been on tons of paranormal shows, such as Most Haunted, Ghost Hunters, and Ghost Adventures. And probably other shows in the future we shall see once pandemic shit gets lifted. Rumors of roving spirits have not scared this ghoul babe off from wanting to explore the location. Not to mention, you guys, future wedding in the Bloody Chapel. All I need is the man now. Taking applications. Wedding in the Bloody Chapel in a black dress while I howl and walk up and down the abandoned halls with a candelabra. Don't at me. So that is the final location that is part of the castle wall there. This is my favorite location, you guys. Dream location. Yes. We'll work on it. I would do literally probably anything to get this location for Haunted Side. I'm not kidding, you guys. If it involves a soul contract of some kind, a soul contract it will be. Yes, let's all go. We'll all go. It'll be a giant trip, and we'll all stay there, and it'll be amazing, and we'll see elementals and ghosts. And drink. So that is the final location that we're going to cover today. If you guys like me doing this and you want me to do future ones, I would be glad to do more paranormal research. One of my favorite things to do, dark history, ghosts, hit done. Like, come on now. I love doing it. I love looking stuff up. I love researching things. And if you guys like doing this, I will cover 6 other locations in a future episode. If you guys want to, if there's particular locations that you are interested in me doing for another episode, comment them in the video below, and I will look into them for you. I like to try to balance it out between like US locations plus international locations, just because I feel like some of the international ones don't get a whole lot of love. So I'm glad you guys liked it. Anybody have any questions about any of the locations that we covered tonight thus far? You guys got to hear a little of my podcasting voice. Oh yeah, ghost towns. Ghost towns are amazing. Old West ghost towns. Oh yeah. Prince of Wales Hotel in Niagara. We did a Niagara Falls episode for the podcast, and it was, I don't think we covered that location, but we covered a couple different locations in like upstate New York, kind of the Niagara area. But thank you. They are skeleton hands. If anyone has any questions, or if you have any questions about other locations, I've researched tons of locations, not only for the podcast, but for just my own edifice, because I'm weird. Dark history is great. I know way too many things about some dark subjects that people are like. I have a book on torture devices in my bathroom that gives you any kind of insight onto my weird. People don't stay long in my house. The missions in California, for sure. There's got to be some. Well, I'm sure there's got to be some rich history there for absolutely. I mean, there's so many places in Nevada that it's already like, you know, to get to and stuff. So the scariest place I went to, well, I don't get scared, you guys. But hold on. Let me resize my window here because I am having all kinds of, it really does. Research really does suck you in, and then it's hours later. Montreal. Yep. Abandoned mining town. Thanks. I'm awesome. I try. I have my moments. Scariest place I've ever been to. I have not really been scared at any place I've been to as of yet. I would say the most disturbing thing I've had happen was the doppelganger event that many of you know that story. That's just the weirdest thing I've ever had happen, and I can't explain it. Like, I can't explain. There's literally no explanation outside of the fact that somebody's messing with me, but they swear they're not. So that's probably the most disturbing thing I've had happen / scariest thing I've had happen. So I've not been scared. I'm not easily scared off. Tell it again. Do you guys want to hear the doppelganger story? My hair and my face. I got some sort of Clark Kent thing going on with my bangs right now. Hold, please. You do not know of the doppelganger story. Okay, so doppelganger story. Yeah, I got too much reflection in these. That's not going to work. Anyways, so doppelganger story. We were at the Tahoe Biltmore last year in November, 2019, pre-pandemic, doing the very first Haunted Side paranormal takeover event at the Biltmore. And there was a point, I believe it was Saturday, that after a PowerPoint presentation, the guys had done a presentation. This is the first time meeting them in person, by the way. I'd had Patrick on the show, on the podcast. I had talked to him on the phone. I'd never met him in person until that weekend. Hey, Nikki. I'd not met Jason at all. So this is my first weekend meeting them. And on Saturday, they did a presentation in one of the conference rooms where Patrick talked about ghost hunting equipment. And then Jason did a presentation on cameras and filming stuff. And then there was a cocktail party that they talked about in the previous live. I think they talked about the cocktails that they had done. And after that, we split into groups to investigate the hotel, because basically the hotel was open to us just running the grounds pretty much. So Patrick took a group of people, we don't know where. He literally just disappeared with people, and I had no idea where he went, and Jason didn't know where he went. So Jason and I had been talking. Jason's like, do you want to go investigate the engineering hallway, because we'd had a lot of activity there prior in the day? And I said, yeah, let's go. So Jason, it was me, Jason, Rob, his wife, and a drunk couple that thank God we ditched later. But it was about 6 of us that went to go investigate the engineering hallway. We're back there for about 45 minutes, about an hour. We were getting some pretty crazy responses. It was a very active hallway. Then the activity started to die down a little bit. And I was like, Jason, I go, hey, I said, I think the spirits are getting a little tired. I said, maybe we give them a break and go somewhere else. And he goes, that's fine. He goes, I have to go upstairs to change batteries in the equipment and to ditch this drunk couple that was arguing with each other. And it was so awkward. So we get in the elevator, and it was Rob, his wife, me, Jason, and we're going up to Nerve Center on 4, I think on their 4th floor room to go get stuff. And the drunk couple was like, are you guys coming back? And Jason's like, yeah, we're coming back downstairs. And the door closes, and he leans over to me and he goes, we're not coming back for them. And I was like, oh, thank God. So we get upstairs. We're in the room. Meanwhile, again, we have no idea. Patrick has taken the rest of the group pretty much, which was about 15 to 20 people, and has disappeared into the hotel. We have no idea where they are. And we're talking, and Jason's like, where do you guys want to go next? And Rob's like, well, maybe we go back to the chapel. That was pretty active earlier too. So we're like, okay. So we're coming out of the room, and this is where the story gets crazy, you guys. So we're coming out of the hotel room. I am first. Jason is behind me. Rob and his wife are behind Jason. Patrick comes running down the hallway, grabs my arm and goes, you guys have to get to the rafter room. You guys have to get to the rafter room now, right now. It's crazy, and keeps running. And Jason's like, wait, what? Rafter room? What? He goes, and Patrick turns around and looks back at us and goes, yeah, it's crazy up there. You guys have to get there now. And then runs around the corner and disappears. And I looked at Jason and I was like, okay, rafter room, I guess, which the rafter room, which you guys have seen from the New Reality episode, that's where they were in the rafters at the Biltmore. Is on the 4th floor. There's a door that just goes up to these rafters into the roof where the plumbing is at. So we're like, okay, that was weird. Patrick runs around the corner, and Jason's like, well, maybe he forgot something in his room and he just had to go back and get it, because his room was on that side of the hotel, or on that side of the hallway. And so we go into the rafters, climbing up the stairs, ducking pipes. The walkways are like this big, you guys. This place was built in the 1920s. It was not made for high heels either, which is what I was wearing. That's another story. Bad fashion choice. Never made that mistake again. So we're coming up there, and there are 2 distinct rafters in a larger part of the rafter room. So there's the one that we were coming up on, and right across from it there's a little stairway and a walkway and another plankway. And behind that is a little room, like a little, almost like a crawl space, but it's tall enough to walk in. Across from where we are coming in on the one walkway, across from us is the other group of people, all about 15 of them. And guess who is back in the back corner behind 15 people? Patrick is back there. And Jason goes, "What did you want?" And Patrick goes, "What?" And he goes, "You told us to come up here. What did you want?" And he goes, "I haven't left this corner back here." And we look at, guys, we look at the group, because it was a tiny walkway and a tiny doorway leading back to this little tunnel space, this little room. He would have had to have gotten all the way out there and all the way around and all the way down within, it only took us like 5 minutes to get from the hotel room where we saw him to where we were, up in the roof. He would have had to have either gotten around them and gotten them all to lie for him, and somehow found a secret passage back into there, because he ran the opposite direction from where we were. He ran this way. The room was that way. So unless he found some sort of secret clue hatch that he popped in and out of and told them all, "Don't say anything," he's looking at us like, "What are you talking about?" And Jason goes, "Dude, that's not funny. That's not fucking funny." He goes, "You told us to come up here." And he's like, "I haven't." And we look at the group and they're like, "We've had equipment," and they're holding the SLS camera. They have cameras. They're like, "We've had cameras on him the entire time he's been up here. He has not moved from up here." And I went, so you were there and you are wearing what you are wearing right now. Like, it was you, and you were solid, and you were wearing the clothes you are wearing now, and your doppelganger just touched me, and I don't know if that means I die next. I don't know what that means. But it can't mean anything good. So we were like, I still can't explain it. And to this day, like, because I did later on, I was like, dude, if you were fucking with us, that's fine. Kudos for the good joke. I pinned him down at one point and I went, "Was that you? Were you messing with us? You can tell me." Because, I mean, game recognizes game. And he was like, I swear that wasn't me. I swear that wasn't me at all. He's like, "I never left up there." So that's the thing I can't explain. So unless there was a secret passage and he got 15 people to lie for him on the spot within 5 minutes and not be winded, guys, I don't even know how to explain that. No, it wasn't my doppelganger, which is not usually the thing, is like you see your own doppelgangers. I don't know. All I know is it was a solid person who had mass of some kind, because it physically touched me. It wasn't like I could see through him. It was solid. And it ran around the corner and disappeared. Yeah. I don't know. So compared to that, I mean, a ghost can literally whisper in my ear and be like, "Well, are you a doppelganger? Then fuck off." Hashtag fake Patrick. There's the fake Patrick. You guys. So there's fake Jason, fake Jeremy, and hashtag doppelganger fake Patrick. There's the fake Patrick. Yeah. Right? No, I haven't seen season 11 of X-Files. I do love X-Files. I love X-Files. One of my cats is named after an X-Files episode. It's funny because it's the one that everybody thinks like, "Oh, is she named after a character on Charmed?" I'm like, No, she's named after an X-Files episode. Yes, and I would love to go back there, but they are closing the Tahoe Biltmore, unfortunately, and I think they're going to tear it down, which is very sad. The place has been there since the 1920s, and it's very, very haunted. So it makes me sad when stuff like that go away. But it was quite an unforgettable experience. I've never seen a doppelganger before in my life, and I hope I don't ever see one again. Hey, fake real but gay crow, or whatever you just said that I butchered. Hello. So yeah, this is the wrap party of the haunted history. I was telling the doppelganger story. You were walking in right now. Yeah, they're tearing down the Biltmore, to my knowledge. Somebody can correct me on that if that is incorrect, but as far as I had heard last, they were tearing it down because they are building apartments or condos or something right up there in Lake Tahoe, and because that's totally necessary, and yay. Not really good at preserving history when it comes to modern development, unfortunately. It felt like a hand. Yes, Daniel, it did. It did not feel like a spirit, like it didn't like pass through me or whatever. It was definitely like, I mean, to be fair, it was like very brief. It was like, and then like that, like maybe a 3 count. Yeah. You want haunted apartments? Glam? That's how you get haunted apartments. Haunted apartments. Doppelgangers. These people have doppelgangers in apartments. And I'm not even sorry about it. Sorry, not sorry. This is what you get. But yeah. Yeah, exactly. Good luck. Good luck with those future apartments. Yeah, it was definitely like, and it didn't feel weird. It didn't feel like cold or something. It didn't feel clammy or anything like that. It felt like, like a normal hand. That's why I was so like wigged out. I was like, are you sure that wasn't you? And he's like, no. I'm like, okay, cool. A demon could literally walk up to me at this point. I'd be like, are you a doppelganger? Get out of here. I've seen cooler. Thank you. And I'm sad that we're not going to get to, but maybe they will. Maybe they'll get to go back up there before it closes. I don't know. Hopefully. I'm hoping they get back up there. Maybe in January. Maybe. I think it's like closes in March or February or something. I'm not 100% sure. But yeah. So you guys enjoyed the history episode. We'll do another one, I think. Does anyone have any other questions, though? Sorry, I took up a huge chunk of time by telling the doppelganger story, but I also never get tired of telling that story. Well, Jason saw him too. I don't know if Rob and his wife saw him because they were still in the room. Only Jason and I were in the doorway, but Jason was there too. So Jason, if you ask Jason, he's like, no, he was 100% there. So both he and I saw, it wasn't like I saw it and Jason was like, who the fuck are you talking to? We both saw him. It was weird. It was weird. It was weird, you guys. Thank you. It is a pretty good paranormal story, I think. Yeah. You're welcome for the story. If no one has any other questions, then since we've been going for about an hour and a half and I don't want to bore you guys anymore, we will probably call it an evening. But stay tuned. Next week, I may have a guest. We may just do this again. If you guys like it, we may expand and start covering some other haunted stuff or some, other paranormal, like maybe explaining paranormal. Like, what would you guys want? Like, do you guys want to see? I love doing the interviews portion of the show, but I would like to also expand my toolbox a little bit I guess. So if these episodes are entertaining, I will continue to do them, or maybe like research on different paranormal phenomena, and like a whole episode maybe about cold spots or about EMF or something like that. So we'll try some things, do something in Oregon. I would love to. Idaho is maybe a future location. So as close as I'm getting right now. Possibly Idaho, maybe, but I don't even know if I'll be there for that. So working on it. Sleep paralysis. Ooh, that would be a good one. Like some like maybe a episode about haunted dolls or something. And like, would you guys be into that? Like whole episode? Maybe not a whole episode. Maybe like half. Maybe half and half. Like one about Annabelle and like the Warrens, and then like something else and like other phenomena. Orbs. Like a haunted history of each state. I could. There's a lot. There's a lot of hauntings. We did a Hometown Haunts episode for each of the hosts of Spooky Show, so some of that's already done. But absolutely, yeah, could do that. So I covered pretty much West Virginia. Actually, there's more. There's more in West Virginia. Just when you think there can't be more, oh wait, there's more, because we didn't even talk about Mothman. He's a moth and a man. Mothman. So, thank you guys for joining me. Next week, we'll do probably history or just maybe a guest. It'll be a surprise. How about that? Be a surprise for Christmas. A pre-Christmas present. You're welcome. That would be fun too. Crow, are you down? Watch and debunk? For an episode? You're better at that than me. I'd be like, what? It's got to be real obvious for me to catch it. I'm kind of thick sometimes. All right. Well, thank you guys for hanging out and entertaining my craziness, because that is what it is. My dark history weirdness. But yeah, thanks guys. Team Rewatch, please rewatch the episode. Link it, share it. I am at 240 subscribers, 240 something, I think, last I looked. So share. Let's see if we can drive that subscription number up a little bit. And thank you guys, and have a lovely evening.